3-1 leads giveth and 3-1 leads taketh away. So Cleveland is not quite the sports capital of America, but a World Series appearance and the city's first sports championship in 52 years are still worth celebrating. Of course, there is one black mark on the Cleveland sports scene. More of a brown mark, I guess. But the Browns' struggles indicate a successful turn in the near future, especially if we look at the turnarounds posted by the Cavs and Indians. In fact, all 4 of the teams that were in this year's NBA Finals and World Series sucked as recently as 4 years ago. At the end of the 2011-2012 season, the Warriors finished 20 games under 500, 13th out of 15 teams in the Western Conference. And the Cavaliers were even worse despite having Rookie of the Year Kyrie Irving, who they were able to draft because they went from a 61-win team with LeBron to a 63-loss team when he left for Miami. In 2012, the Indians were a 94-loss team, and the Cubs lost 101 games. All 4 of these teams went from cellar to contender in less time than it takes for the Olympics to come back around. And they all did it in a way that's largely repeatable regardless of sport. I mean, okay, not everybody can just be the hometown team of the best player in a generation, but there are distinct similarities. Think of winning a major sports championship as a puzzle. The first thing you do is look for the corner pieces. Those are the smart people you put in charge of building a roster and coaching the team. The Cubs and Indians were built by Theo Epstein and Chris Antonetti, largely regarded as 2 of the brightest minds in baseball. Bob Myers was handpicked by a Silicon Valley billionaire. These guys didn't build championship caliber teams by accident. And Cavs GM David Griffin doesn't get a ton of credit, but he made some bold moves that have given LeBron way more support than he ever had during his first stint with the team, which is to say, some support at all. Okay, so you've got the corner pieces of the puzzle, now you start connecting the border pieces to build a frame, acquiring and developing young talent. Whatever sport you're in, there aren't that many can't-miss prospects in the draft, so the more draft picks you have, the better chance you have of finding a future star. But that's only half the puzzle. Young players need coaching and a system that takes advantage of their strengths. Without the right environment to highlight his strengths, Draymond Green would just be a loudmouth asshole instead of an all-star who's a loudmouth asshole. Young talent and good coaching builds depth on a roster, and depth bails teams out when injuries strike or when management decisions go wrong. NFL teams like the Patriots and Seahawks can afford to miss on a first-round pick because they regularly develop late-round picks into stars. Next step, fill in the puzzle's most colorful pieces and acquire some stars. It's always nice to grow your own, but a free agency splash or a timely trade are often the biggest pieces of the puzzle. LeBron's the obvious example for free agency, or maybe now it's Kevin Durant, but the Cavs and Warriors couldn't hope to land those superstars without first building a structure that allowed them to succeed. As for trades, the mid-season addition of Andrew Miller pushed the Indians from division leader to title contender, and the Warriors' acquisition of Andre Iguodala solved a defensive hole and gave them a Finals MVP. And finally, the impossible pieces that make no sense until the puzzle is almost complete: veteran role players. Build 90% of a championship puzzle, and the last 10% of the pieces fall into place for cheap. Oh hey, looks like there's some tread left on the tires of this John Lackey. Send him out to the mound. Smart people in charge, a bunch of young talent in the draft, a couple stars, and veteran role players. Boom! Championship! I may have oversimplified things a bit, but that's the meat of it. Of course, luck plays a role with any team's fortunes, and it's imperative that management strikes the right balance between patience and boldness. Look at the Cubs. Chicago hired Theo Epstein in October 2011, and the team finished in 5th place for 3 straight years while they waited for talented prospects to develop. In Philadelphia, the 76ers may have run out of patience for Sam Hinkie's process, but Hinkie also hurt himself by always choosing the long play instead of making a bold move towards winning. The right leadership finds that balance between patience and boldness without choosing half measures. Epstein was criticized for his acquisition of Aroldis Chapman, and he deserved it on moral grounds, but it ultimately brought the Cubs closer to a World Series victory. It was a bold move. Look at David Griffin's first 3 months on the job. He hired first-time NBA coach David Blatt from the EuroLeague, traded top draft pick Andrew Wiggins for Kevin Love, and convinced LeBron James to rejoin the team, whose owner wrote a public breakup letter to him in Comic Sans. The next season, he fired Blatt with the team in first place because they couldn't win a championship with him in charge. Not every move was necessarily the right one, but he's never been guilty of sitting on his hands when things aren't right. Which brings us back to the Browns. I'm telling you, they are going to be good. They have smart people in charge. They have a massive stockpile of draft picks, and they are starting to take bold steps to acquire stars. They're going to be good in like 2 or 3 years. Yes, they need a quarterback. No, this version of the Browns has never had one. But don't worry, curses aren't real. Evil billionaire owners taking hobos' draft advice is real, but not curses. We've seen too many of them end. It happened for the Cavs. It happened for the freaking Cubs. It can happen for literally anyone. Cleveland doesn't have to be Cleveland anymore, and neither does your crappy favorite team.